3,000 feet down, in water black as ink, something the size of a school bus is hunting. It has not seen sunlight in over an hour. It does not need to. A sperm whale can hold one breath and dive deeper than the Empire State Building is tall, stacked 6 times over. Down there we would be crushed before we finished a single thought. But the whale is calm. It fires off the loudest sound any animal makes, louder than a rocket launch, and turns that sound into a picture of the dark. Somewhere close, a giant squid is trying to survive the next 30 seconds. If you have ever wondered why we never hear about a human caught in the middle of a hunt like this, stick around, because the answer says as much about our limits as it does about the whale's power. If this kind of story pulls you in, tap subscribe before we go further. It helps more of these reach you. Take one last breath. We are going down. A shape slides under the waves, longer than a city bus and heavier than 10 elephants stacked together. This is the sperm whale, and nothing about its size is small. A full-grown male can stretch 52 feet from nose to tail. Line it up next to a school bus, and the whale wins by more than 10 feet. Set it beside a semi-truck trailer, and the whale still hangs over both ends. Its head alone takes up a third of its body, a giant block shaped like a battering ram, packed with a strange golden oil scientists still argue about. Females stay smaller, closer to 36 feet, about the length of a bowling lane. But even the smaller ones outweigh a school bus loaded with passengers. A newborn calf arrives already the size of a pickup truck, nursing on milk thick as toothpaste so it can pack on weight fast in open water. Picture standing next to one on a dock. Your head would not reach its eye. Your outstretched arms would not span one flipper. And that flipper hides a skeleton eerily close to a human hand. 5 long finger bones wrapped in blubber and muscle, a leftover blueprint from millions of years ago, when this animal's ancestors walked on land. The skin tells its own story. Thick, wrinkled, grey-brown, built to survive scraping against rock and battling prey in total darkness. Scars crisscross older whales like a record of every fight they survived. Some of those scars, as we'll get to, come from something with 8 arms and a beak like a parrot. Every part of this body serves one purpose, surviving in a place no other large predator on Earth even attempts to enter. The lungs, the blood, the skull, the fat reserves, all of it exists to support a single mission. Hunt in the deepest, darkest, most crushing part of the ocean, and come back alive. That mission starts the moment the whale leaves the surface. But before we follow it down, we need to understand where these giants actually live. Because the ocean is not one single home. It is a maze of warm currents, freezing poles, and empty stretches of blue that few humans ever cross. The size alone should shock you. Bigger than any predator on land. Bigger than almost any animal that has ever hunted moving prey. Yet size is only the opening chapter of what makes this creature nearly impossible to compete with. What waits below the surface will make the school bus comparison feel almost quaint, because down where this whale is headed, size stops being the most important weapon it carries. Sperm whales do not stay in one ocean. They claim almost the entire planet. From the warm waters near the equator to the icy edges near Antarctica, these whales cross more territory than almost any other creature on Earth. Only orcas roam a wider range. A single sperm whale might travel thousands of miles in a year, following food instead of a map, chasing deep water wherever squid gather in the dark. Males push farther than females, while mothers and calves stay closer to warm tropical water, where calves have a better shot at survival. Grown males often swim alone toward colder seas near the poles. Picture leaving a beach vacation and swimming solo toward Antarctica. No map, no gear, just instinct and a body built for the cold. That is a normal year for a male sperm whale. What they all share is a taste for one kind of terrain: deep water close to steep underwater cliffs, canyons and slopes. Flat, shallow seas hold little interest for them, because flat and shallow means no squid. Sperm whales gather where the ocean floor drops away fast, where a short swim from the coastline can suddenly plunge thousands of feet down. Places like the Gulf of Mexico, the waters off the Azores, and canyons along the California coast pull whales in because the seafloor there acts like a staircase straight into hunting grounds. They travel in family pods too, mostly females and calves, staying together for decades, teaching younger whales where to find food and how to avoid danger. Pods have been tracked speaking in patterns of clicks unique to their group, almost like a regional accent. Two pods from different oceans click in different rhythms, a kind of whale dialect passed down through generations. None of this explains why they choose the deep dark water instead of easier meals closer to the surface. The answer is simple and brutal. The biggest prey lives where the light cannot reach. Fish and squid near the surface get hunted by dozens of predators. Deeper down, past where sunlight gives up, an entire world of prey waits mostly undisturbed. To reach it, the whale cannot simply swim down like a diver at a pool. It has to prepare its entire body first, right there on the surface, in a ritual that looks almost calm before the fight of its life begins. That ritual starts with something every human takes for granted: breathing. Except for a sperm whale, breathing before a dive works nothing like it does for us, and getting it wrong means death. Before the hunt, there is a pause. The whale floats at the surface, barely moving, and starts to breathe. One breath, a short rest, another breath. This continues for several minutes, sometimes 8 to 10 minutes straight, the whale taking somewhere around 50 to 60 breaths in a row before a major dive. Each breath refills oxygen stores not just in the lungs, but throughout the blood and muscle, because the lungs alone could never hold enough air for what comes next. Watch closely, and you would see the blowhole open and close in a steady rhythm, almost hypnotic, like a diver on a pool deck taking slow breaths before a deep swim. Except this is not preparation for 30 seconds underwater. This is preparation for an hour in crushing dark water, chasing prey that fights back. Humans cannot do this. Hyperventilating before a dive feels like it should help, and freedivers used to try it. But rapid breathing before going underwater can trick the body into a false sense of safety, delaying the natural urge to breathe until oxygen runs dangerously low. Divers have blacked out and drowned from trying to copy what looks like a simple trick. The sperm whale's breathing ritual is not a shortcut. It is the result of millions of years of evolution fine-tuning exactly how much air, oxygen, and blood chemistry a body needs before survival depends on none of it for an hour. While it breathes, something else is happening beneath the surface of its skin. Its spleen contracts, pushing extra oxygen-rich blood into circulation. Its heart rate starts to shift, preparing to slow down the moment the dive begins. Muscles fill with a special oxygen-storing protein that lets them work without fresh air far longer than human muscles ever could. Then, without warning, the whale arches its back, lifts its tail high into the air, and disappears beneath the surface in a single smooth motion. That tail lift is not just for show. It helps drive the whale downward fast, using gravity and its own weight to begin a plunge that most animals on the planet would never survive. At that exact moment, a hidden clock starts ticking. One breath now has to power a dive lasting up to an hour, sometimes longer. No second chances. No coming up early for a quick gasp of air. Whatever oxygen is packed into that body in the next few seconds is all the whale gets until it returns to the exact same spot in the sky it just left. How does one breath stretch that far? The answer is not really about the lungs at all. Here is the strange part. A sperm whale's lungs are not even that big compared to its massive body. Instead of storing oxygen mainly in the lungs like humans do, a sperm whale stores most of its oxygen in its blood and muscles. Its blood carries an extra dense concentration of a molecule called hemoglobin, the same molecule that carries oxygen in human blood, just packed in far greater amounts. Its muscles hold huge stores of a related molecule called myoglobin, so much that whale muscle tissue looks almost black compared to the deep red of human muscle. Think of a car with 2 fuel tanks instead of 1. Most vehicles rely only on the tank connected to the engine. A sperm whale runs on a second hidden reservoir spread through its blood and muscle, one most animals do not have room for at all. That second tank is what lets a single breath support an hour of hard swimming and hunting in complete darkness. A resting human can hold their breath for maybe 1 or 2 minutes before real panic sets in. Elite freedivers, after years of training, can push past 10 minutes in perfect calm water with no exertion at all. A sperm whale does this while swimming hundreds of feet, chasing prey that fights back, all on one lungful of air taken at the surface. To stretch that oxygen even further, the whale's body starts shutting down anything it does not need. Blood flow to the skin, stomach, and other non-essential organs drops sharply. Almost everything gets redirected toward the brain, heart, and swimming muscles, the only parts of the body doing real work during the hunt. It is a built-in rationing system, kicking in automatically the instant the dive begins. None of this would matter if the whale's body could not physically survive the crushing pressure waiting below. Holding your breath is one problem. Having your lungs and ribcage collapse under thousands of pounds of pressure per square inch is another problem entirely, and it is the next hurdle standing between the whale and its meal. Most air-breathing animals would be in serious trouble at this point. The sperm whale is just getting started. Under the surface, pressure builds fast. Every 33 feet of depth adds another full atmosphere of pressure pressing in from every direction. By 1,000 feet down, the pressure is already more than 30 times what you feel standing on dry land. A rigid rib cage like a human's would shatter under that kind of force. So the sperm whale's rib cage is not rigid at all. Several of its ribs connect to the spine with flexible joints instead of solid bone, allowing the entire chest to flex and fold inward as pressure increases. Picture an umbrella closing smoothly in a strong wind instead of snapping apart. That is closer to what happens inside a diving sperm whale's chest. At the same time, the lungs themselves collapse on purpose. This sounds terrifying, but it is not damage. It is a controlled response. As the lungs fold down under pressure, air gets pushed out of the delicate tissue where oxygen exchange happens and squeezed into tougher airways built to handle the crushing force without rupturing. This actually protects the whale from a deadly condition that has injured human divers: nitrogen dissolving into the blood in dangerous amounts. Here is the comparison that makes it click. Imagine crumpling an empty plastic water bottle in your hand until the sides cave in completely, then letting go and watching it pop right back into shape. A sperm whale's lungs do something remarkably similar on every single dive, collapsing on the way down and reinflating on the way back up, hundreds of times over the course of its life without lasting harm. Its skull adds another layer of protection. Air spaces inside the head, ones normally filled with air near the surface, get displaced as depth increases, shifting fluid and fat around to equalize pressure evenly across delicate tissue. Even the whale's massive spermaceti organ, that strange oil-filled block making up much of its head, may play a role in managing pressure and buoyancy on the way down. All of this happens automatically, with no conscious effort from the whale, the same way a human heart beats without instruction. Millions of years of evolution built this system one small adjustment at a time, testing it in the harshest classroom imaginable, the deep ocean itself, where any weak design gets erased fast. With its body now folding safely under pressure, the whale keeps sinking. And somewhere above 1,000 feet, something happens that changes the entire hunt. The last trace of sunlight disappears completely. 600 feet down, the ocean stops looking blue and starts looking grey. Keep descending, and grey fades into a deep, heavy black. This is not nighttime. This is midday, with a bright sun blazing on the surface far above, and it makes no difference at all this far down. Sunlight cannot survive the trip. Water absorbs light far more aggressively than air does, swallowing red light first, then orange, then yellow, until only faint traces of blue remain. Past around 1,000 feet, for all practical purposes, sunlight simply runs out. Scientists call this boundary the edge of the twilight zone, and past it lies a region so dark that some creatures living there have never developed working eyes at all. A sperm whale crosses this boundary in minutes, sinking straight down like a submarine cutting its engines and letting gravity take over. There is no adjustment period, no slow transition. One moment there is faint light overhead. The next, there is nothing but black water stretching in every direction, with no visual landmarks at all. Try this comparison. Stand in a closet, shut the door, and cover every crack of light with a towel. That kind of total darkness is what a sperm whale swims through for the better part of an hour, except spread across a space the size of a small city, with prey hiding somewhere inside it. Most animals rely on sight above almost everything else. Down here, sight becomes almost useless. A human diver with the strongest flashlight available could see only a small bubble of light around themselves, maybe 20 or 30 feet in any direction, surrounded by an ocean of blackness pressing in on every side. Panic sets in fast for people who experience this kind of darkness even briefly. The sperm whale does not panic. It does not need light at all, because it long ago evolved a completely different way of seeing, one that has nothing to do with eyes and everything to do with sound. We will get to exactly how that works soon, because it might be the single most impressive tool this animal carries. For now, picture the whale continuing straight down, past the point where a human eye becomes useless, deeper than almost any submarine built for regular use, deeper than a nuclear attack submarine is rated to survive, and it is not even close to finished descending yet. Here is where the scale of this dive becomes almost impossible to picture. A typical hunting dive for a sperm whale reaches somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 feet down. Some dives push past 7,000 feet, deeper than 1.25 miles straight down into the ocean. To understand what that actually means, picture the Empire State Building, one of the tallest structures ever built by humans, standing at just over 1,200 feet from base to tip. Now stack 6 of those buildings directly on top of each other, one after another, reaching straight up into the sky. That impossible tower is roughly how far a sperm whale routinely swims downward on a single hunting dive, except instead of climbing up through open air, it is sinking down through crushing water in complete darkness, holding one breath the entire way. Commercial airplanes cruise at around 35,000 feet. A sperm whale's dive, stacked end to end, would reach about 1/5 of that altitude, except measured straight down into ocean instead of straight up into sky. It is one of the most extreme vertical journeys any air-breathing animal on the planet attempts on a regular basis, and it does it several times a day, every single day for most of its adult life. Compare that to human limits. The deepest scuba dive ever safely completed by a trained diver using special gas mixtures reached just over 1,000 feet, and it required years of preparation, custom equipment, and a support team standing by for a rescue that could have been needed at any second. That single record dive, one of the deepest ever attempted by a human being, does not even reach where a sperm whale casually begins its normal hunting range. Military submarines, built from thick steel and engineered specifically to survive crushing ocean pressure, have official depth limits too, and many stay well within limits far shallower than where sperm whales hunt every day without any mechanical help at all. The whale carries no steel hull, no pressurized cabin, no engineering team. It carries blubber, flexible bone, and a nervous system fine-tuned over millions of years. At this depth, in this darkness, under this pressure, a human body would already be in fatal trouble. But the whale is not struggling. It is hunting calm and controlled exactly where it belongs. The real danger for humans at these depths is not really about crushing pressure at all. It comes from something invisible, dissolved quietly into the bloodstream, and it is exactly what the whale's collapsing lungs are built to prevent. Pressure alone does not usually kill human divers who go too deep. Something sneakier does the damage first, and it hides inside the very air we breathe to survive underwater. Normal air is made mostly of nitrogen, a gas that does nothing to us under regular pressure at the surface. Underwater, though, increasing pressure forces more nitrogen to dissolve into a diver's blood and body tissue than usual. Stay too deep for too long, and that dissolved nitrogen builds up to dangerous levels, a condition called nitrogen narcosis, sometimes nicknamed rapture of the deep by old-time divers. The effects sound almost pleasant at first, which makes them even more dangerous. Divers describe a strange, drunken calm settling in, judgment slipping away quietly, confusion replacing clear thinking. Divers deep in narcosis have been known to remove their own breathing equipment underwater, convinced for a few fatal seconds that they no longer need it. Rescue divers tell stories of pulling confused, smiling divers back toward the surface against their will because narcosis had convinced them everything was fine. Ascend too fast afterward, and a second danger appears. Dissolved nitrogen can form actual bubbles inside the blood and joints as pressure drops, a condition called decompression sickness, known more commonly as the bends. Divers surfacing too quickly have collapsed in agonizing pain, bubbles forming inside joints, and even the spinal cord, sometimes causing permanent injury or death. A sperm whale never deals with either problem, and its collapsing lungs are the reason why. Remember the folding ribcage and lungs from earlier. As those lungs collapse under pressure, air gets forced out of the soft tissue where nitrogen would normally dissolve into the bloodstream, pushed instead into stiffer airways designed specifically to resist gas exchange at depth. Less air trapped in exchange tissue means far less nitrogen entering the blood in the first place. It is almost like the whale's body solved the exact safety problem that still injures and kills trained human divers today, except it solved it millions of years before humans ever built a single piece of diving equipment. Modern dive tables, safety stops, and slow controlled ascents all exist because human bodies never developed this same natural protection. This single difference, buried deep inside lung tissue most people never think about, marks one of the clearest lines between what a sperm whale can survive and what a human body simply cannot. But nitrogen is only half the story. The other half involves the very air tanks meant to keep human divers alive in the first place, and they fail long before reaching anywhere close to where the whale hunts. Strap on a scuba tank, and there is a hard limit built into that equipment, one most recreational divers never even get close to testing. Standard scuba gear is rated for roughly 130 feet, the accepted safe limit for recreational diving worldwide. Push past that using normal air tanks, and the risks of narcosis and decompression sickness climb sharply. Technical divers using specially blended gas mixtures can stretch further, sometimes past 300 feet, but every additional foot demands more expensive gear, more backup systems, and far more risk of something going fatally wrong. Compare that number to where a sperm whale begins its normal working day, 3,000 feet and beyond. The gap is not small, it is not even close. A trained technical diver at their absolute limit has not even covered 1/10 of the distance a sperm whale casually swims on an average dive. Even armoured diving suits built specifically to resist crushing pressure, the kind used for deep sea salvage work, hit hard limits around 2,000 feet before becoming too heavy and rigid to use safely. Beyond that, humans switch entirely to submersibles, small rigid vehicles with reinforced hulls, the only real option for humans wanting to see the depths a sperm whale swims through using nothing but its own body. Here is a comparison worth sitting with. Imagine a marathon runner who trains for years to finally complete a full 26-mile race. Now imagine a rival who runs that same 26 miles as a casual warm-up before starting their actual workout. That gap, roughly 10 times the effort for one side compared to the other, is close to the real difference between a technical diver's absolute limit and a sperm whale's routine hunting depth. Every piece of equipment humans have ever engineered to survive deep water, from tanks to suits to submersibles, exists specifically to solve a problem the sperm whale's body solved through evolution alone, no metal or plastic required. That gap in ability is not a small technical detail. It is the entire reason humans could never physically compete for the same prey the whale is chasing right now. And the deeper this whale swims, the more its own heart starts changing rhythm, slowing down deliberately to buy itself even more time in a place built to kill almost anything that enters it unprepared. At the surface, a sperm whale's heart beats at a fairly normal, steady pace. The moment it dives, that pace starts dropping, sometimes cutting down to a fraction of its resting rate. This is called the diving reflex, and it exists in a milder form in humans too. Splash cold water on a human face, and heart rate drops slightly within seconds, an old evolutionary leftover from ancestors who spent more time in water. In a sperm whale, this same reflex gets turned up to an extreme level, a survival tool refined over millions of years instead of a minor leftover reaction. As heart rate slows, blood flow gets redirected away from organs that can survive briefly without a steady oxygen supply. The stomach, kidneys, and skin all take a backseat. Meanwhile, the brain, heart, and core swimming muscles keep receiving a steady stream of oxygen-rich blood, prioritized above everything else in the body. Think of it like a building losing partial power during a storm. Emergency generators do not waste energy lighting every hallway and closet. They route power straight to essential systems, elevators for emergency use, critical medical equipment, exit lighting. Everything non-essential goes dark until the crisis passes. A diving sperm whale runs its entire circulatory system the exact same way, rationing blood flow like precious backup power. This slowed heartbeat also helps explain something remarkable: how the whale can hold still, hunt actively, chase moving prey, and still stretch one breath across nearly an hour. Every system working overtime, like fast-twitch swimming muscles chasing down a fleeing squid, still needs oxygen. The diving reflex buys time by cutting waste everywhere else in the body, funneling every available resource toward the parts of the whale actually doing the work of hunting. Scientists tracking tagged whales have recorded heart rates during deep dives dropping to roughly a quarter of their surface resting rate, sometimes even lower during the deepest, longest portions of a dive. For comparison, imagine a human heart normally beating around 70 times a minute suddenly dropping to somewhere close to 15 or 20 beats a minute, while that same person continues moving, working, and chasing something through darkness. In a human, a heart rate that low while active would signal a medical emergency. In a diving sperm whale, it signals the system working exactly as designed. With its body now fully adapted, oxygen rationed, pressure managed, heart rate lowered, the whale is finally ready for the actual hunt. And waiting somewhere in that blackness is prey unlike almost anything else on the planet, an animal with an eye larger than a human head. Somewhere in the black water ahead, a giant squid drifts, and it might already sense something is wrong. Giant squid can grow up to 43 feet long, counting their 2 long feeding tentacles stretched out to full length. Their main body, called the mantle, reaches around 7 to 8 feet on its own, still longer than most humans at all. 8 arms lined with suckers ring a sharp, parrot-like beak, strong enough to slice through flesh in seconds. Their eyes are the real showstopper. A giant squid's eye can grow to roughly the size of a dinner plate, close to 10 or 11 inches across, the largest eye of any animal known to science. Compare that to a human eye, roughly the size of a large grape, and the difference becomes almost comical. Scientists believe those massive eyes evolved specifically to catch the faintest traces of bioluminescent light in deep water, giving the squid at least some early warning before a predator arrives. Some early warning is not the same as a real defense, though, and against a sperm whale even those enormous eyes may not be enough. The squid's best advantages, size, hidden colouring, and near-total darkness, mean far less against a predator that does not rely on light to find its target in the first place. Giant squid are not the only prize down here either. An even larger, heavier relative called the colossal squid lives in the coldest southern oceans, with eyes even bigger than a giant squid's and hooked, swivelling claws on some of its arms instead of simple suckers. Colossal squid can weigh over 1,000 pounds, making them the heaviest invertebrate known to science, though far fewer have ever been recovered or studied compared to their giant squid cousins. Neither squid asked for this fight. Both are ambush predators themselves, more accustomed to hunting fish and smaller squid than defending against something with the size and power of a sperm whale. But down here, in a place with almost no witnesses and no cameras rolling, the ocean's food chain gets settled the old way, through raw size, speed, and whichever animal senses the other first. For the squid, survival depends on staying hidden in the one advantage darkness still offers. But the whale is about to prove that darkness barely matters at all, once you know how to see with sound instead of light. A sperm whale does not need eyes to find a giant squid in pitch darkness. It builds a picture out of sound instead, and the process works closer to a hospital ultrasound than anything most people would call hearing. Deep inside its massive head sits a structure called the spermaceti organ, a huge chamber filled with a strange waxy oil. Air passages near the whale's blowhole produce rapid clicking sounds, and the spermaceti organ acts like a built-in lens, focusing and aiming those clicks into a tight, powerful beam pointed directly ahead of the whale, almost like a flashlight beam made entirely of sound instead of light. Those clicks travel outward through the water, hit any solid object in their path, a squid, a rock formation, a school of fish, and bounce back as echoes. The whale's lower jaw, packed with a special type of fat, channels those returning echoes toward its inner ear, where its brain assembles the pattern into something close to a 3-dimensional picture of whatever lies ahead. This entire system is called echolocation, and the sperm whale runs one of the most powerful versions of it found anywhere in nature. Picture a doctor running an ultrasound wand over a patient's abdomen. Sound waves go in, bounce off organs and tissue at different densities, and return as an image displayed on a screen, revealing shapes no human eye could see directly through skin. A sperm whale performs a version of this constantly while hunting, except instead of a small screen, the picture forms directly inside its brain, built from thousands of returning echoes every single minute. This gives the whale a massive advantage over any prey relying purely on hiding in darkness. A giant squid's camouflage, its dark reddish skin blending into black water, becomes almost meaningless against a hunter that never relied on light in the first place. Sound punches straight through the one defense the squid was counting on. Scientists studying tagged whales have recorded distinct clicking patterns tied to different stages of a hunt. Slower, spaced-out clicks during the initial search, growing faster and more frequent as a potential target gets located and pursued. Each pattern serves a specific purpose, refining the picture the whale is building with every returning echo. And here is the part that turns this ability from impressive into genuinely frightening. The clicks a sperm whale uses to see are not just loud. They rank among the most powerful sounds ever measured coming from any living creature on the planet, humans included. Numbers alone rarely capture how extreme something really is. This one manages it anyway. A sperm whale's loudest clicks have been measured at up to 236 decibels underwater, the loudest sound ever recorded coming from a living animal. To put that in context, a jet engine at full power standing right next to the runway reaches somewhere around 140 decibels. A rifle fired close to the ear hits around 165 decibels, loud enough to cause instant hearing damage without protection. Even NASA's most powerful rocket ever launched, the Saturn V, produced a launch sound reaching roughly 204 decibels at its most intense point, a sound so violent it could shatter windows and rattle bones from a distance away. A sperm whale's click, generated by a single living animal with no engines or fuel involved, still measures louder than that historic rocket launch, because decibels increase on a scale where each small jump represents a huge leap in actual power. The gap between a sperm whale's click and a jet engine is not simply moderate. It represents a difference of intensity in the millions, not the hundreds. Nothing else alive comes remotely close to matching it. Sound behaves differently underwater than it does in air, travelling faster and losing less energy over distance, which is exactly why a sound this powerful proves so useful for hunting, in an environment stretching for miles in every direction. Other whales, even ones many miles away, can sometimes detect a sperm whale's clicks, using sound as a kind of long-distance communication network stretched across huge sections of open ocean. For a giant squid caught in the direct path of one of these clicks at close range, the experience would be nothing short of violent. Some researchers believe a concentrated blast from a sperm whale's most intense clicks could physically stun or disorient prey at close range, an idea that shifts these sounds from simply a sensing tool into something closer to an actual weapon. If that theory holds up, then a sperm whale is not just finding its prey through sound. It might be softening up the fight before it even begins, using pure acoustic force as the opening move in an underwater ambush, unlike anything else in the animal kingdom. Here is where a hunting tool starts to look like a weapon instead. Scientists have long debated whether a sperm whale's clicks serve purely as sonar, or whether the most intense bursts double as an actual attack, capable of harming prey directly through sound alone. The theory sounds almost too dramatic to be real, until you consider what 236 decibels actually does to a body at close range. Sound is not just something we hear, it is a physical pressure wave, pushing and pulling on anything it passes through, including soft tissue filled with fluid, exactly the kind of tissue found inside a squid's body or inside a human chest cavity. At extreme intensity, that pressure wave stops being a gentle vibration and starts becoming a genuine physical force, capable of disturbing or damaging delicate internal structures. Researchers studying this question have pointed to some intriguing clues. Squid recovered from sperm whale stomachs occasionally show no visible injuries at all beyond what came from the whale's own beak or teeth, raising the question of whether they were somehow disabled before the whale ever made physical contact. If a whale can stun prey with sound before ever touching it, the fight becomes far less risky for the whale and far more hopeless for the squid from the very first moment of the encounter. Some scientists remain more cautious, arguing the primary purpose of these intense clicks is still detection rather than direct attack, similar to how a much louder flashlight beam simply reveals more detail rather than harming whatever it shines on. The debate remains open, an active area of ongoing research rather than a fully settled question. What almost nobody disputes is the risk this poses to anything soft-bodied caught at extremely close range, humans included. Divers who have accidentally found themselves near actively echolocating sperm whales have reported feeling the clicks as a physical sensation in their chest, not just something heard through the ears. A sound this powerful does not stay confined to hearing alone. It becomes something you feel throughout your entire body. This single ability, turning sound itself into a possible weapon, adds another item to the long list of reasons no human diver could ever survive an actual encounter deep in sperm whale hunting grounds. But detecting and possibly stunning prey solves only part of the problem. The whale still needs to know precisely what shape it is chasing through the dark, and that answer comes from an even more refined version of the same sound-based system. Finding a target with sound is only step one. Actually identifying what that target looks like requires something far more precise. As a sperm whale closes in on potential prey, its clicking pattern shifts. Instead of widely spaced clicks meant for general searching across a large area, the whale narrows its beam and increases click frequency, gathering finer and finer detail about the object ahead, almost like adjusting a camera lens from a wide establishing shot down to a tight, detailed close-up. This process works remarkably close to a medical ultrasound machine, the same kind used to check on a developing baby before birth. In both cases, sound waves travel into an object, bounce back at different rates depending on density and shape, and get reassembled into a detailed picture, revealing depth, texture, and structure invisible to the naked eye. A doctor reads that picture on a screen. A sperm whale reads it directly through evolved neural pathways connecting its ears straight into specialized processing regions of its massive brain. This level of detail lets the whale distinguish a giant squid from a rock formation, a school of fish from a single larger target, even in conditions of complete and total darkness. Scientists studying recorded click patterns have identified distinct changes correlating with different hunting phases: search, approach, and final pursuit, each with its own unique acoustic signature. Consider how impressive this actually is. A human radiologist spends years training to properly interpret an ultrasound image displayed clearly on a screen in a well-lit room. A sperm whale performs a comparable feat of pattern recognition instantly, unconsciously, while simultaneously swimming, holding its breath, and chasing a moving target through complete darkness thousands of feet below the surface. This ability likely helps explain something else remarkable about sperm whale hunting success. Despite the total absence of light, these whales appear to locate and capture prey with real efficiency, filling their massive stomachs with squid on a regular basis. Sound-based vision, once dismissed by early scientists as a lesser sense compared to eyesight, turns out to rival or even exceed what vision could accomplish in an environment where light simply cannot survive. With the target now clearly identified, tracked and closing distance, only one phase of the hunt remains, and it happens fast, faster than almost any other part of the entire dive, as clicking sounds compress into something scientists have nicknamed the final buzz. The last moments of the hunt sound nothing like what came before. As a sperm whale closes the final distance on its target, individual clicks blur together into a rapid, continuous buzzing sound, sometimes reaching hundreds of clicks per second. Scientists studying recorded dive audio call this the terminal buzz, a burst of extremely rapid echolocation used to track a target's exact position during the critical final seconds before an actual strike. Think about the difference between a slow, steady drum beat and a drum roll played so fast the individual hits blend into one continuous sound. That shift, from spaced-out clicks to a dense, rapid buzz, marks the transition from general searching into precise split-second targeting, the acoustic equivalent of a predator's final lunge. This buzz phase typically lasts only a few seconds, an intense sprint of information gathering right as the whale closes the gap on fast-moving, actively fleeing prey. Giant squid are not helpless targets. They can move with surprising speed and power for their size, using jet propulsion to shoot away from danger in sudden bursts. The whale's buzz phase exists specifically to track those last-second, unpredictable movements in real time, adjusting its own approach dozens of times per second if needed. Tagged whale recordings have captured this buzz phase directly, followed immediately by a period of silence or reduced clicking, likely representing the actual capture attempt itself, a moment where continuing to click may offer little additional benefit compared to the physical act of striking and grabbing prey with its jaw. Success is not guaranteed, even at this final stage. Sperm whales sometimes come up from dives without any prey at all, and evidence from their skin tells the story of fights that did not go entirely their way. Scars found on whale skin, especially around the head and jaw, offer a permanent record of encounters where a squid managed to fight back hard before losing, or in rare cases before escaping entirely. Those scars are not a footnote to the story. They are some of the only physical proof scientists have of a battle almost never witnessed directly by human eyes, fought thousands of feet below any boat, camera, or observer. And what those markings reveal is more intense than most people expect from a fight. Most of us assume the whale always wins easily. Not every hunt ends cleanly. The proof is written directly onto a sperm whale's skin. Older sperm whales, especially large males, often carry circular white scars scattered across their heads and jaws, sometimes numbering in the dozens. These marks come from squid suckers, each one lined with a ring of sharp, tooth-like structures called denticles, designed to grip prey and hold on with serious force. A giant squid fighting for its life can leave behind a permanent record on a whale's skin, sucker mark after sucker mark, a map of exactly how hard that particular fight actually was. Some scars measure several inches across, hinting at squid larger than anything typically recovered by human researchers, since the biggest, oldest squid are also usually the best at avoiding capture, evading nets, and staying far below where cameras or submersibles regularly travel. The largest scars found on some whales suggest encounters with squid potentially even bigger than the largest giant squid ever formally measured and recorded by scientists. Consider what this actually means. A giant squid, weighing hundreds of pounds, wrapped in powerful arms lined with gripping suckers, fighting directly against an animal many times its size and weight. The squid stands almost no realistic chance of winning outright, but almost no chance is not the same as no fight at all, and the scars prove these battles get physical, violent, and dangerous even for the whale delivering the killing strike. Picture a heavyweight boxer stepping into the ring against a much smaller opponent. The outcome feels certain from the opening bell. But even a fight that ends in a clear, decisive victory can leave real marks on the winner: bruises, cuts, sore ribs, proof that the smaller opponent still managed to land some real hits before finally going down. Sperm whale scars work the same way, physical evidence that these squid never simply surrender without resistance. Occasionally, evidence suggests some squid do manage to escape entirely, breaking free from a whale's grip and disappearing back into the darkness, carrying torn tentacle stumps or damaged arms as their own scars from the encounter. Regrowth has even been documented in some recovered squid specimens, arms partially regenerated after apparently surviving an attack that should have ended in death. These scars turn a distant hidden hunt into something far more real and immediate. This is not a gentle chase ending quietly. It is closer to a full-contact wrestling match, fought in complete darkness under crushing pressure, one where even the winner walks away marked, and these marks raise an obvious question worth sitting with as we go deeper still. If a sperm whale fights this hard against prey built with claws, beaks, and raw power, what would happen if something even larger waited in that same darkness? That question, and what lives even deeper than the giant squid, is exactly where we go next. Deeper still, in the freezing water ringing Antarctica, an even larger relative of the giant squid waits in near total mystery. This is the colossal squid, and until very recently, no living human had ever laid eyes on one in its own world. The colossal squid can grow up to 23 feet long and weigh over 1,100 pounds, making it the heaviest invertebrate known to science, heavier than the giant squid even though it usually measures shorter overall. Picture a small fire truck drifting silently through freezing black water, and you have a rough sense of its bulk. Instead of the simple gripping suckers found on a giant squid's arms, the colossal squid carries something far nastier. Rotating, hooked claws lining its arms and the ends of its two long tentacles, swiveling like tiny grappling hooks designed to sink deep into prey and refuse to let go. Scientists first identified and named this creature back in 1925 using only broken pieces recovered from fishing nets and the stomachs of dead sperm whales. For a full century after that, nobody managed to film one alive in its natural home. Researchers pieced together its existence almost entirely second-hand, through beaks and arm fragments pulled from whale stomachs and the throats of seabirds. Then, in the spring of 2025, a research team using a deep-sea robot near the South Sandwich Islands finally captured the first confirmed footage of a living colossal squid drifting nearly 2,000 feet down in freezing water. The squid on camera was a juvenile, barely 1 foot long, a transparent, delicate-looking creature nothing like the monster its full-grown relatives become. That single piece of footage rewrote a century of guesswork in one afternoon, and it raises an obvious question. If a colossal squid this size can go unseen and unfilmed for 100 years, how many other hunts, battles, and near misses between whales and squid have happened in total darkness with absolutely no witness at all? Sperm whales are believed to hunt colossal squid alongside giant squid based on beak fragments recovered from whale stomachs, matching the colossal squid's distinctive hooked structure. A fight between a 52-foot whale and a creature covered in rotating claws would rank among the most violent encounters in the entire ocean, and it has likely played out thousands of times across the Southern Ocean without a single camera ever capturing it. This gap in direct observation is not unique to the colossal squid. It touches nearly every part of a sperm whale's hunting life. Scientists can measure dive depth with satellite tags. They can record clicks with underwater microphones. They can study scars left behind on recovered whale skin. What they still cannot do, despite decades of trying, is watch the actual moment of capture unfold from start to finish, deep in the pitch-black water where it actually happens. That gap between what we know and what we have actually witnessed with our own eyes is bigger than most people realise, and it says something important about just how far beyond human reach this entire world remains. No camera on Earth has ever captured a complete sperm whale hunt from start to finish. Not the search, not the chase, not the final strike. The full sequence remains one of the largest gaps in modern ocean science. The reasons stack up fast. Depth alone rules out almost every standard camera and submersible. Most research submersibles rated for these depths are slow, loud, and limited to short battery-powered trips. Nothing built for tailing a 52-foot predator through a chase that can last several minutes and cover a wide stretch of open water. Darkness rules out natural light entirely, and any artificial light bright enough to see by risks scaring prey away or disturbing the whale's own hunting behaviour before the chase even begins. Researchers have tried creative workarounds. Suction cup cameras, nicknamed critter cams, have been temporarily attached to the backs of sperm whales, riding along for a single dive before detaching and floating back to the surface for recovery. These cameras have captured genuinely remarkable footage. Whales swimming through the twilight zone, flashes of movement in the dark, brief glimpses of possible prey. What they have not yet captured is the complete, unmistakable sequence of a whale actually catching and consuming a giant squid in real time. Surface encounters offer another small window. In 2015, footage emerged from waters off Japan showing a sperm whale near the surface with visible squid remains, evidence of a completed hunt rather than the hunt itself. Fishermen and researchers have occasionally spotted injured giant squid drifting near the surface, likely having escaped a whale attack moments earlier, offering an aftermath rather than an actual battle. Compare this to how thoroughly humans have documented predators on land. Lions hunting on the African savanna have been filmed thousands of times in daylight from helicopters, drones and ground vehicles, capturing every stage of a chase from stalking to the final takedown. A sperm whale hunting a giant squid remains almost entirely hidden, protected by depth and darkness far more effectively than any predator on land could ever be protected by distance or fear of humans. This mystery matters beyond simple curiosity. Understanding exactly how these hunts unfold, how often whales succeed, how long a typical chase actually lasts, could reveal crucial details about the health of deep ocean ecosystems and how vulnerable these hunting patterns are to disruption from noise, warming water, or declining squid populations. For now, the full picture stays locked behind pressure and darkness, pieced together only through scars, stomach contents, and brief fragments of tagged footage. And that same darkness and pressure explains something else entirely. Why some of the most advanced machines humans have ever built for underwater survival still cannot follow where this whale goes without serious risk of failure. Military submarines represent some of the most advanced engineering on the planet. built specifically to survive crushing ocean pressure far beyond what any surface ship could handle. Even these machines have limits, and a sperm whale routinely swims past them. Publicly available defense estimates suggest many modern attack submarines operate safely down to around 800 to 1,000 feet, with an emergency crush depth, the point where the hull would actually fail under pressure, estimated somewhere in the range of 2,000 feet or slightly beyond for many common designs. Exact figures remain classified by nearly every navy on Earth, for obvious strategic reasons, but independent estimates place the danger zone for most conventional submarines well below where a sperm whale casually begins a normal hunting dive. Picture a submarine's thick steel hull, built with reinforced ribs and pressure-resistant welds designed by teams of engineers over years of testing. Now picture a sperm whale reaching that same depth using nothing but blubber, flexible bone, and folding lungs, then continuing on for another 2,000 or 3,000 feet beyond it, without a single mechanical part involved anywhere in the process. This gap becomes even more striking with deep-sea research submersibles, the specialized vehicles built specifically to explore extreme ocean depths that regular submarines cannot reach. These vessels use thick, rounded hulls, often made from titanium or specially engineered materials, precisely because standard submarine designs cannot survive the pressure found several thousand feet down. Even these purpose-built machines require years of design, testing, and certification before they can safely carry a human passenger anywhere close to where a sperm whale swims on an ordinary afternoon. The catastrophic failure of an experimental submersible in the North Atlantic in 2023, where a hull built outside standard engineering certification imploded under pressure near the wreck of the Titanic, offered a stark public reminder of what happens when something built by humans fails to properly account for the ocean's crushing force. That vessel was operating at roughly 12,500 feet, deeper than a typical sperm whale dive, but the underlying lesson still applies directly. Deep ocean pressure does not forgive engineering mistakes, and it does not offer second chances. A sperm whale carries no certification, no engineering review, and no emergency beacon. It carries only a body shaped by millions of years of trial and error in the harshest classroom on the planet. Every single successful dive represents a design that has already been tested more times and more thoroughly than any human-made vehicle in history. Understanding just how extreme this pressure really is starts to explain something else entirely. What would actually happen to an unprotected human body if it somehow ended up at the depths where this whale spends nearly half its life? Push a human body, completely unprotected, down to where a sperm whale routinely hunts, and the results would be immediate and catastrophic. At the surface, air fills every space inside the human body: lungs, sinuses, middle ears, digestive tract. Air compresses far more easily than water or solid tissue, which means those air-filled spaces are the first structures to suffer as pressure builds. Even a moderate, poorly managed dive can rupture an eardrum or damage sinus tissue within the first 100 feet. Push far beyond that, into the thousands of feet where a sperm whale hunts, and any remaining air pockets in an unprotected body would be crushed instantly, far too fast for any conscious response. Think about squeezing an empty aluminum can in your fist until it crumples flat in an instant. That sudden, violent collapse, rather than a slow, gradual squeeze, is closer to what would happen to unprotected airspaces in a human body dropped suddenly to extreme ocean depth, all within a fraction of a second, faster than pain signals could even reach the brain. This is not simply theoretical. Real submersibles have suffered catastrophic pressure failures, and investigators studying these events have confirmed that a sudden hull breach at extreme depth causes an implosion so fast that it happens before the human nervous system has time to register what occurred. The ocean's pressure at these depths does not act like a slow crushing weight. It acts more like a detonation, compressed into an instant. Sperm whales avoid this exact fate through the adaptations covered earlier: flexible ribs that fold instead of shatter, lungs built to collapse safely rather than rupture, and a body chemistry that keeps dangerous gas exchange to a minimum throughout the entire dive. Every one of those systems exists specifically to prevent the kind of instant, catastrophic failure that would happen to an unprepared human body in seconds. This is not a minor technical detail buried in a biology textbook. It represents the exact dividing line separating a creature built for this environment from one that could never survive even a brief accidental visit. A sperm whale does not brave the deep ocean through courage or willpower. It survives through a body engineered across millions of years specifically to prevent the kind of failure that would end a human life almost instantly. And yet somehow, after enduring all of this, after collapsing its lungs, rationing its blood and surviving pressure that would destroy an unprotected human in a fraction of a second, the whale still has to make the return trip, climbing back up thousands of feet toward the surface, facing a completely different set of dangers on the way home. Hunting is only half the mission. Getting back to the surface alive without injury marks the other half, and it happens on a strict, unforgiving internal clock. As a sperm whale finishes its hunt and begins the ascent, its body starts reversing everything it just did on the way down. Heart rate gradually climbs back toward normal. Blood flow returns to organs that had been temporarily deprioritized during the deepest part of the dive. Those folded, collapsed lungs slowly begin reinflating as pressure eases with every foot gained toward the surface. The pace of this ascent matters immensely, because the whale's body largely avoided absorbing large amounts of nitrogen into its blood during the dive. Thanks to those collapsing lungs discussed earlier, it faces far less risk of dangerous gas bubbles forming during a fast ascent, compared to a human diver breathing compressed air from a tank. This built-in safety margin allows sperm whales to surface more quickly and directly than a human diver ever safely could after a deep dive. Picture a slow-motion rocket launch running in reverse, gaining speed gradually as it approaches its final destination, instead of the other way around. A sperm whale's ascent follows a similarly smooth, controlled path, angled and steady rather than a chaotic race straight upward. Reaching the surface, the whale exhales sharply through its blowhole, releasing a visible spray of warm, moist air mixed with seawater that can be seen from boats and shorelines miles away. This first breath after a long dive is explosive and immediate, followed quickly by a steady rhythm of breathing meant to rebuild oxygen stores before the next dive begins. Recovery time varies, but whales typically spend 8 to 10 minutes at the surface after a major dive, breathing steadily before preparing to descend again. Multiply this pattern across an entire day, and a sperm whale might complete 10 or more major hunting dives, each one following this same demanding cycle of preparation, descent, hunt, and careful return. This entire system, breathing, diving, hunting, and safely resurfacing, depends on every single piece working correctly, every single time, for the whale's entire life. There is very little room for error built into an activity this extreme, repeated this many times, day after day, for decades. Which raises an unsettling question. What happens when even one small part of this finely tuned system breaks down? The answer shows up on beaches around the world, in one of the most tragic and least understood events in all of marine biology. Sometimes, a sperm whale ends up somewhere it should never be. Stranded on a beach, out of water entirely, its own body weight suddenly turning against it. In the ocean, water supports a whale's enormous mass from every direction at once, distributing the load evenly across its entire body. Remove that support, and gravity takes over completely. A sperm whale's internal organs, never designed to bear weight without water's constant support, can begin collapsing under their own mass within hours of stranding, crushing the lungs and heart from the inside in a way the ocean itself would never allow. Scientists studying strandings have identified several possible triggers. Navigation errors sometimes send whales, especially inexperienced younger animals or sick individuals, into shallow coastal water where they become disoriented and cannot find their way back to deep water. Illness or injury can weaken a whale to the point where it drifts helplessly with tides and currents. In some documented cases, loud underwater noise, particularly certain types of military sonar testing, has been directly linked to sudden, unusual stranding events involving deep-diving whales. The connection to sonar deserves special attention. Some sonar frequencies appear to interfere with a whale's ability to navigate and communicate normally, occasionally triggering panic or disorientation strong enough to send deep-diving whales rushing toward the surface far faster than their bodies are built to handle, or pushing them into unfamiliar shallow water where stranding becomes far more likely. Picture a skyscraper elevator, built to carry weight only while supported by strong steel cables. Cut those cables suddenly, and the same structure that worked perfectly under proper support becomes a liability instead. A sperm whale's body works on a similar principle, magnificently supported and functional in deep water, dangerously vulnerable the moment that support disappears entirely. Rescue attempts for stranded whales rarely succeed for animals this large. Volunteers and marine biologists have worked for hours trying to keep stranded whales wet and cool, while waiting for a high enough tide to refloat them, but success rates remain painfully low for an animal weighing tens of thousands of pounds. Every hour spent stranded increases internal organ damage, making a full recovery even less likely. Strandings offer scientists a rare, if tragic, opportunity to study sperm whale anatomy up close, something almost impossible to do with a living whale in open water. Necropsies performed on stranded whales have revealed stomach contents, old injuries, and health details that have quietly rewritten large portions of what researchers understand about how these animals actually live. This vulnerability on land connects directly to a growing modern threat happening entirely underwater, one with no beach or stranding involved at all. Ship engines and military sonar are increasingly jamming the very sense sperm whales depend on most to find food in the first place. The ocean used to be a quiet place for a hunting sperm whale. It is not quiet anymore, and that change is making survival noticeably harder. Modern cargo ships, tankers and cruise liners generate enormous amounts of underwater noise simply through their engines and propellers churning through the water. This noise does not stay near the surface. It travels for miles in every direction, sometimes overlapping directly with the exact frequency range sperm whales rely on for echolocation and communication. Remember how a sperm whale builds a picture of its surroundings using returning echoes from its own clicks. Now, imagine trying to hold a quiet conversation in a room where a construction crew is running jackhammers nearby. Important details get lost in the noise, signals become harder to interpret, mistakes become more likely. Ship noise creates exactly this kind of interference for a whale trying to track fast-moving prey through complete darkness thousands of feet below. Military sonar testing adds another layer of disruption. Certain sonar frequencies, particularly the kind used in some naval exercises, have been linked in multiple research studies to sudden changes in sperm whale behaviour, including abandoned dives, unusual surfacing patterns, and in the most severe documented cases, mass stranding events discussed earlier. Researchers continue actively studying exactly how much noise represents a genuine threat versus a temporary harmless disruption, and the science here remains an evolving, ongoing area of study rather than a fully settled question. Studies tracking whale behaviour near busy shipping lanes have recorded measurable changes compared to quieter areas, including whales spending less time actively clicking and hunting, and more time simply trying to avoid the source of noise entirely. Less time spent effectively hunting can translate directly into less food, which over time threatens the health and survival odds of individual whales and entire populations. Picture trying to read fine print during a blackout, using only brief flashes of a flickering flashlight to catch glimpses of the page. Ship noise does something comparable to a whale's echolocation, turning a normally clear, reliable signal into something fragmented and harder to trust. Conservation groups and researchers have proposed solutions, including quieter ship propeller designs, adjusted shipping lane routes away from key whale habitats, and stricter guidelines around military sonar testing near known whale populations. Progress remains slow and uneven across different countries and industries, but the underlying problem is now well documented and taken seriously by marine scientists worldwide. This growing noise problem represents a real, modern threat, layered on top of an already extreme and demanding lifestyle. And it is only one danger among many waiting in the whale's underwater world, a world crowded with other strange creatures the whale passes by on nearly every hunting dive it makes. A sperm whale is not the only strange creature living in this crushing, sunless world. It shares the depths with a lineup of animals that look like they belong in a nightmare rather than an ocean. Anglerfish drift through these depths, using a glowing lure dangling directly above their mouths, tempting smaller prey close enough to snap up in an instant. Their bodies stay small, often no larger than a softball, but their appearance, oversized jaws packed with long, needle-thin teeth, makes them look far more threatening than their actual size suggests. Gulper eels take a different, equally strange approach, built almost entirely around an enormous mouth capable of swallowing prey larger than their own head, an adaptation useful in a place where meals do not come around often and opportunities cannot be wasted. Vampire squid, despite the dramatic name, are gentle, slow-moving creatures that feed mostly on drifting debris called marine snow, rather than hunting live prey at all, using webbed arms lined with spines more for defense than attack. Here is a surprising twist most people do not expect. Despite popular imagination picturing the deep ocean as full of car-sized monsters, most creatures living at these depths stay remarkably small. Limited food supply this far from sunlight means smaller bodies generally survive better than large ones, since smaller animals need less energy to stay alive in a place where meals can be scarce for long stretches. The giant and colossal squid stand out specifically because they represent rare exceptions to this general rule, a genuine deep-sea gigantism driven by their unusual biology rather than a common pattern shared by most deep-sea life. A sperm whale passing through this neighbourhood likely encounters dozens of these strange creatures on every single dive, though most hold little interest as actual food. Stomach content studies on dead sperm whales have occasionally turned up unexpected items, deep-sea fish, smaller squid species, and once in a while, materials that suggest the whale swallowed something purely by accident while pursuing a more important target nearby. Picture walking through an unfamiliar neighbourhood at night, passing dozens of strangers along the way while focused entirely on reaching one specific destination. A sperm whale moves through its neighbourhood in a similar way, alert to its surroundings but locked onto a specific target, rather than distracted by everything else drifting past in the dark. None of these creatures rely on sunlight to survive, and many of them have developed a completely different way of dealing with total darkness, one that has nothing to do with sound at all. Instead, they make their own light, and the results turn this pitch-black world into something closer to a slow-motion, silent fireworks display. Total darkness does not mean total blindness for every creature down here. A remarkable number of deep-sea animals solve the light problem by generating their own glow, a phenomenon called bioluminescence. Scientists estimate that a large majority of animals living in the deep ocean's darkest zones can produce some form of light on their own bodies, using a chemical reaction inside specialized cells rather than anything resembling a light bulb or battery. This glow serves wildly different purposes depending on the species. Anglerfish use it purely as bait, dangling a glowing lure to attract curious prey close enough to strike. Some small fish and shrimp use sudden flashes purely as a defense, startling a predator for just long enough to escape into the surrounding darkness. Even giant squid, the very prey a sperm whale hunts, may use bioluminescence as a warning system. Some squid species can emit a startling flash of light when threatened, or in rare cases release a cloud of glowing ink instead of the ordinary dark ink squid used closer to the surface, since regular dark ink would be completely useless as camouflage in a place with no light to hide from in the first place. Here is a detail that changes how you should picture this entire hunt. A sperm whale relies primarily on sound, not sight, to find its prey, but that does not mean light plays zero role at all. A defensive flash from a threatened squid could theoretically offer a fleeting visual cue, alongside the sound picture the whale is already building, even if vision remains a secondary, less crucial sense for a hunting sperm whale compared to echolocation. Picture a pitch-black concert venue suddenly filled with hundreds of tiny flashing lights from the crowd, each one appearing and disappearing in an instant, scattered randomly across an otherwise invisible space. That chaotic, flickering scene offers a rough sense of what the deep ocean can look like during an active moment. Dozens of creatures flashing brief signals for their own separate reasons, largely disconnected from each other's purposes. Researchers studying this phenomenon note that bioluminescence likely evolved independently, many separate times across completely different, unrelated species, a strong sign of just how useful this trait becomes once regular sunlight disappears from an environment. Convergent evolution like this, unrelated animals independently developing a similar solution to the same extreme problem, offers one of the clearest signs of just how powerful natural selection becomes when survival depends on solving one specific brutal challenge. None of this changes the whale's fundamental hunting strategy, still built primarily around sound rather than sight. But it does reveal just how alive and active this supposedly empty, silent, pitch-black world actually is, filled with far more activity, communication and strategy than its complete darkness would ever suggest to a casual observer glancing at a description on paper. Sailors and scientists have a name for the layer of ocean where most of this hunting takes place, the Midnight Zone, and once you understand how much of the planet it actually covers, the name starts to feel like a serious understatement. The Midnight Zone begins around 3,200 feet down and extends thousands of feet deeper from there, covering a vertical stretch of water taller than most mountain ranges found on land. No sunlight reaches this layer at all, not even the faintest trace, making it permanently, completely dark, regardless of the time of day or season above the surface. Here is a comparison that tends to shock people the first time they hear it. Scientists have mapped the surface of Mars in far greater detail than they have mapped the deep ocean floor here on Earth. Despite Mars sitting roughly 140 million miles away on average, high-resolution satellite imagery has covered nearly its entire surface. Meanwhile, large sections of Earth's own deep ocean floor, sitting just a few miles beneath ships that cross it every single day, remain completely unmapped in any real detail. By some estimates, more than 80% of the entire ocean remains unexplored and unmapped by humans. A staggering number considering the ocean covers roughly 70% of the planet's entire surface. The Midnight Zone alone, where sperm whales spend a huge portion of their lives hunting, represents one of the largest, least understood habitats found anywhere on the planet. Picture the tallest mountain range you have ever seen in photographs, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Now picture that same towering scale, except instead of rising up into open sky, it stretches straight down into crushing permanent darkness, filled with creatures most people have never even heard of, let alone seen. That is the actual scale of the world a sperm whale calls home for a significant portion of every single day. Despite covering such an enormous space, the Midnight Zone actually holds surprisingly little biological activity compared to sunlit waters closer to the surface, since almost nothing here can photosynthesize the way plants and algae do near the surface. Instead, life in this zone survives largely on nutrients and organic material slowly drifting down from above, a constant gentle snowfall of decaying matter that scientists call marine snow, feeding an entire hidden ecosystem far removed from anything happening near the beach or the boat deck above. A sperm whale moves through this massive, largely unexplored world like a resident moving confidently through a familiar neighborhood, while humans remain essentially tourists peering in through tiny windows of light and sound, catching only fragments of a much larger picture. And that gap between resident and tourist explains, more clearly than almost anything else covered so far, exactly why a human being has never once shown up as prey during one of these ancient ongoing hunts. After exploring pressure, darkness, sound, and scale, the original question finally has a clear answer. A sperm whale has never hunted a human being, and the reasons run deeper than simple luck. Location rules out the possibility almost entirely on its own. Sperm whales hunt primarily between 1,000 and 6,000 feet down, an environment humans simply cannot reach without heavy mechanical equipment. Without a submersible or specialized deep sea gear, a human being physically cannot be present in the same space where this hunting actually happens. You cannot become prey in a location you can never actually visit. Diet specialization closes the gap even further. Sperm whales have spent millions of years evolving specifically to detect, chase, and capture squid and certain deep sea fish, species whose size, shape, movement patterns, and echo signature. The whale's brain has been finely tuned to recognize instantly through echolocation. A human body swimming or floating nearby would register as something completely unfamiliar, nothing like the specific acoustic signature a hunting whale has spent its entire life learning to recognize and pursue. Historical encounters between humans and sperm whales, going back centuries, involve almost no documented cases of a whale treating a human as potential prey. Sailors who fell overboard near sperm whales, divers who have unexpectedly encountered them in open water, none of these situations have produced credible evidence of predatory behavior directed at a human being. The handful of dramatic historical incidents involving sperm whales and humans, covered in detail next, involve something completely different: defensive aggression, not hunting behaviour. Picture a bear encountering a car for the first time. The bear has no evolved instinct telling it a car represents food, because cars simply did not exist during the millions of years that shaped bear hunting behaviour. A sperm whale looking at a human swimmer faces a similar mismatch. Humans do not match any hunting pattern written into a sperm whale's evolutionary programming, because humans have never been a meaningful part of the environment these whales evolved to survive in. This does not mean every encounter between a human and a sperm whale is automatically safe. Wild animals of this size can cause serious harm accidentally, through a startled tail strike or unintentional collision, especially near the surface where humans are more likely to actually cross paths with one. But accidental harm from a startled, enormous animal is fundamentally different from deliberate predatory hunting, and sperm whales show no evolved pattern suggesting the second scenario has ever meaningfully occurred. Humans simply never became part of the ancient, ongoing story playing out in the deep. But that does not mean the two species have no history together at all. For a brief, brutal chapter, roughly 2 centuries ago, humans became the actual hunters, and one particular sperm whale fought back in a way that reshaped an entire genre of storytelling. For roughly 200 years, humans turned the tables completely, hunting sperm whales relentlessly across every ocean on the planet, chasing a prize far more valuable at the time than most people realise today. Sperm whales carry a unique substance inside their massive heads called spermaceti, a waxy oil that burned cleaner and brighter than almost any other lighting fuel available before electricity existed. Through the 18th and 19th centuries, entire fleets of wooden sailing ships set out specifically to hunt sperm whales, powering lamps, candles and machinery across much of the industrialised world, using oil harvested from these animals. This era produced one of the most famous true stories in maritime history. In 1820, a whaling ship called the Essex was struck and sunk by an enormous sperm whale in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, an extraordinarily rare instance of a whale directly and deliberately ramming a hunting vessel large enough to destroy it. Survivors drifted for months in small boats, facing starvation and unimaginable hardship, before a small handful were eventually rescued. This real event later inspired the classic novel featuring a vengeful white whale, a story most people recognise even if they have never read the original book. Picture wooden rowboats, carrying only a handful of men armed with hand-thrown harpoons, chasing an animal capable of diving deeper than a fully loaded submarine and surviving pressure that would instantly destroy an unprotected human body. The imbalance in power seems obvious now, yet for 2 centuries, human ingenuity and persistence proved dangerous enough to hunt these giants to the edge of extinction. Commercial whaling devastated global sperm whale populations, with some estimates suggesting numbers dropped by well over half, compared to populations before large-scale hunting began. International bans and stricter regulations eventually slowed the industry through the 20th century, and sperm whales now carry legal protection as an endangered species across most of the world. This history flips the entire narrative explored throughout this story. In the deep ocean, surrounded by darkness and crushing pressure, the sperm whale reigns as an unmatched predator, equipped with tools no human body could ever match. Near the surface, facing organised human hunters armed with harpoons and ships, that same whale became the hunted, vulnerable in ways it never faces against a giant squid in its own natural habitat. Populations are slowly recovering today, though sperm whales still face modern threats: entanglement in fishing gear, ship strikes, and the noise pollution covered earlier. The predator that rules the deepest hunting grounds on the planet remains surprisingly fragile near the surface, caught between 2 completely different worlds, with 2 very different sets of rules. And when a sperm whale's long life finally does end, its story does not simply stop. Its body becomes the foundation for an entirely new, hidden ecosystem that can thrive in complete isolation for decades after death. When a sperm whale finally dies, its story continues in a way almost nobody expects. Its massive body sinks slowly toward the ocean floor, and what happens next can support an entire hidden community of life for 50 years or longer. Scientists call this event a whale fall, and it unfolds in distinct stages once a carcass settles onto the deep ocean floor. In the first stage, large scavengers arrive almost immediately: sharks, hagfish, and other deep-sea predators tearing into soft tissue, stripping away most of the whale's flesh over a period lasting several months to a couple of years, depending on the carcass size. Once the soft tissue is gone, a second stage begins, sometimes lasting years, as smaller opportunistic species move in: worms, crustaceans, and mollusks feeding on leftover scraps buried in the surrounding sediment. This stage attracts a surprising amount of biodiversity, sometimes supporting more distinct species in one small area than researchers find on similarly sized patches of ordinary seafloor nearby. The final, longest stage might be the strangest one. Bacteria begin breaking down fats stored deep inside the whale's massive skeleton, releasing sulfur compounds as a byproduct. This process can support entirely specialized bacterial communities that essentially run on chemical energy instead of sunlight, similar to communities found around deep-sea hydrothermal vents. This sulfur-rich stage alone can continue for decades, sometimes lasting 50 years or more before the skeleton finally breaks down completely. One remarkable creature depends almost entirely on this stage to survive, a type of worm scientists nicknamed the bone-eating worm, which bores directly into whale skeletons to access fat stored deep inside the bone itself. Some of these species appear to exist almost exclusively around whale falls, meaning their entire survival strategy depends on finding a massive dead whale on the seafloor, a resource that might only appear once every several years across a huge stretch of ocean. Picture a single fallen tree in a forest, one that ends up supporting insects, fungi, and small animals for decades as it slowly decomposes on the forest floor. A whale fall works on a similar principle, except scaled up dramatically and stretched across the barren, mostly empty deep ocean floor, where a sudden burst of nutrients this concentrated almost never occurs naturally otherwise. This means a sperm whale's impact on its ecosystem does not end with its final breath. The same animal that spent decades hunting giant squid thousands of feet below the surface spends its final decades afterward feeding an entirely different community of deep sea life, quietly supporting an ecosystem most humans will never see or even learn exists. Behind every part of this incredible life, the diving, the hunting, the echolocation, and even this final act after death, sits one organ doing the heaviest lifting of all, the largest brain ever grown by any creature in the history of life on Earth. Every ability covered so far, the echolocation, the precise hunting, the controlled breathing, the social bonds between family members, traces back to one remarkable organ. The sperm whale carries the largest brain of any animal known to have ever existed, living or extinct. A sperm whale's brain weighs somewhere between 17 and 20 pounds, roughly 5 to 6 times heavier than a typical adult human brain. Picture holding a bowling ball in each hand, then combining their weight into a single organ, and you get a rough sense of the raw physical scale involved. Raw size alone does not tell the whole story, though. Scientists typically measure intelligence potential using brain size relative to overall body size, not just total weight on its own. By this particular measurement, a sperm whale's brain-to-body ratio actually falls below that of humans and even some dolphin species, since the whale's enormous overall body size dilutes the comparison somewhat. What makes a sperm whale's brain genuinely remarkable is not simply its size, but how much of that massive organ appears dedicated specifically to processing sound. Regions responsible for interpreting echolocation clicks and their returning echoes take up an unusually large portion of total brain tissue, likely reflecting just how central sound-based hunting has become to this species' entire survival strategy across millions of years of evolution. Consider what this brain actually accomplishes during a single hunting dive. It manages precise breath holding lasting up to an hour. It processes thousands of returning echoes per minute, assembling them into usable spatial information in complete darkness. It coordinates complex muscle movements during a high-speed chase against fast, evasive prey. And it does all of this simultaneously, without any conscious break in concentration, for the entire duration of a single dive, then repeats the whole process again just minutes later. Beyond hunting, this same brain supports remarkably complex social behavior. Sperm whale pods communicate using distinct patterns of clicks called coders. sequences that appear to function almost like a spoken dialect, varying measurably between different whale populations scattered across different oceans. Some researchers studying these patterns describe them as a form of culture, passed down through generations, learned rather than purely instinctive, a concept once thought to be almost uniquely human. A brain this large, this specialized, and this socially sophisticated raises fascinating questions researchers are still actively working to answer. What does a sperm whale actually experience during a dive this extreme? How much of its behavior reflects conscious decision-making versus pure evolved instinct? Science does not yet have complete answers, and that uncertainty itself reveals just how much remains unknown about an animal humans have studied for centuries. That same complex brain also plays a crucial role in something covered earlier only briefly: the surprisingly tight, structured family bonds sperm whales maintain, even while the most extreme hunting happens almost entirely alone. A sperm whale dives into the crushing dark completely alone. Yet back at the surface, it belongs to one of the tightest, most structured family systems found anywhere in the animal kingdom. Female sperm whales and their calves form long-term family groups called pods, typically built around several related females and their young, staying together for years, sometimes for decades at a time. These pods function almost like an extended, permanent family unit, with older females passing down knowledge about feeding grounds, safe travel routes, and danger avoidance to younger generations over time. Adult males follow a completely different path. Around the time they reach adolescence, young males typically leave their birth pod entirely, often joining loose, temporary groups of other males before eventually becoming largely solitary as full adults, roaming colder waters near the poles alone for much of the year. This creates a striking pattern: females building lifelong social bonds close to warm equatorial waters, while males live increasingly isolated lives in some of the coldest, most remote stretches of ocean on the planet. Here is where the family structure becomes especially important. A sperm whale calf cannot dive nearly as deep or hold its breath nearly as long as a fully grown adult, since its lungs and oxygen storing systems have not fully developed yet. This creates an obvious problem when a nursing mother needs to dive thousands of feet down to hunt, leaving her calf unable to follow into the exact depths where food actually waits. Pods solve this problem through a behavior scientists call allomothering, essentially a built-in babysitting system. While one or more mothers dive deep to hunt, other adult females in the pod stay behind near the surface, watching over calves collectively, protecting them from surface predators like sharks until the hunting mothers return. This system allows the entire pod's hunting and feeding schedule to continue smoothly, without ever leaving a vulnerable calf completely unprotected near the surface. Picture a group of neighborhood parents taking turns watching each other's children, so that some can run errands while others stay behind supervising the group. Sperm whale pods run on a strikingly similar cooperative principle, refined over countless generations into an essential survival strategy rather than a simple convenience. This combination, solitary extreme hunting paired with deeply cooperative family life at the surface, makes sperm whales unusual even among highly intelligent ocean predators. Few other animals on the planet balance such intense individual survival skill with such consistent structured social cooperation across multiple generations. Even with everything covered across this entire story, from collapsing lungs to babysitting pods, one honest truth remains. Large sections of a sperm whale's hunting life are still completely unknown, and some of the biggest questions may never receive a complete answer. After exploring nearly every stage of this hunt, from the first breath at the surface to the final descent into total darkness, one honest fact remains standing above all the others. Huge portions of a sperm whale's actual hunting life are still completely unknown to science. Nobody has ever filmed a complete sperm whale hunt from start to finish, meaning researchers still cannot say with total certainty exactly how long a typical chase lasts, how often a hunt actually succeeds versus ends in failure, or precisely how a whale makes those final split-second decisions during the terminal buzz phase covered earlier. Every piece of this puzzle has been assembled indirectly, through scars, stomach contents, brief tagged footage, and careful scientific inference rather than direct, complete observation. The question of whether a sperm whale's loudest clicks can genuinely stun or injure prey at close range remains an active, unsettled debate within the scientific community, with compelling evidence pointing in multiple directions and no fully confirmed answer either way. Similarly, exactly how much of a whale's hunting behaviour reflects pure evolved instinct versus something closer to conscious decision-making remains a genuinely open question, one that touches on much larger, harder debates about animal consciousness in general. Even something as basic as total population numbers carries real uncertainty. Researchers rely on incomplete survey data, difficult tracking conditions, and limited funding to estimate how many sperm whales remain in the world's oceans today, numbers that matter enormously for conservation efforts, but remain harder to pin down precisely than most people realise. Picture standing at the edge of an enormous, unlit cave, holding only a small flashlight. You can see enough to understand the cave is vast, filled with detail, clearly significant. You cannot see the whole thing at once, no matter how long you stand there studying the small circle of light in front of you. That gap between what scientists can currently observe and the true scale of what remains hidden captures exactly where sperm whale research stands today. Genuinely significant progress made, with an honest, humbling amount still left completely in the dark. None of this uncertainty diminishes what has actually been confirmed through decades of careful research. The dive depths, the collapsing lungs, the extraordinary clicks, the family bonds, the whalefalls feeding entire ecosystems for decades after death, all of it stands on solid, well-documented scientific ground. What remains unknown simply reminds us how much more waits to be discovered in a place still largely unexplored by human eyes. A creature capable of diving deeper than the tallest building on Earth stacked 6 times over, generating sound louder than a rocket launch, and surviving pressure that would destroy an unprotected human body in an instant, continues hunting in near total secrecy, just a few thousand feet beneath ships, coastlines and beaches full of people who will never witness it directly. The hunt continues right now, somewhere in the dark, exactly as it has for millions of years, largely unseen and still not fully understood.